A UFO, unidentified flying object, is any object flying in the sky which cannot be identified by the person who sees it. Sometimes, the object is investigated. If people can still not figure out what the project is after an investigation, it's called a UFO. If they figure out what the object is, it can no longer be called a UFO because it has been identified. Even though UFOs can be anything, people often use the word UFO when they're talking about alien spacecraft. Flying saucer is another word that is often used to describe an unidentified flying object. Studies estimate that 50 to 90% of all reported UFO sightings are identified later. Usually 10 to 20% are never identified. Studies also show that very few UFO sightings are hoaxes, people trying to trick other people. Most UFOs are actually natural or man-made objects that looked strange. 80 to 90% of IFOs are identified as one of three different things: astronomical causes, for example planets, stars, or meteors; aircraft; balloons, including weather balloons. 10 to 20% of IFOs are other causes, such as birds, clouds, mirages, searchlights, etc.
Let's look at the science of rain and how raindrops form. First, we'll need the sun. When the sun shines on water on the Earth's surface, the heat of the sun warms the water, turning it into an invisible gas called water vapor. This process, the changing of water into a gas, is called evaporation. Because gases are lighter than liquids, water vapor rises up into the sky, and the further you move up and away from the Earth's surface, the colder the temperature gets. So in the sky, the water vapor cools and changes back into tiny water droplets. This change is called condensation and is the opposite of evaporation. Clouds are made up of tiny water droplets, so when condensation occurs in the sky, clouds form and grow. Let's take a closer look. When water droplets bump into one another, they stick together and grow in size. They continue to grow until they are too heavy and fall as rain. They even grow as they bump into one another on their journey from the cloud to the ground. And every single raindrop that reaches the ground is made up of 1 million of the original tiny water droplets. Raindrops fall on the ground surface where the sun can shine on them, and the whole process happens again. This is called the water cycle and keeps water moving from the ground to the sky, providing the water needed for plants, animals, and people to survive.
Humans are pretty lucky with the way we can communicate. Unlike animals, we have the perfect length necks and excellent control of our breaths. Both of these characteristics allow us to form words. Although animals can't talk like us, they still have special ways to communicate. For example, dolphins have one of the most sophisticated forms of communication. They make distinct whistling sounds that help identify themselves. Dolphins may also squeak or yelp depending on the situation. Nevertheless, each sound relays meaningful information. You have probably heard some birds say words just like us, but they are merely repeating what they hear. Most birds communicate through songs and squawks that can be beautiful for us to listen to. Other animals communicate without making a sound. Elephants show affection by wrapping their trunks around each other. Whales leap out of the water to send messages to their friends. Bees perform a special dance when they have located nectar in a tree. Even if it's just our pet dog wagging his tail or our pet cat purring, all animals have their own way to convey information to us and each other.
What is precipitation? Clouds hold millions of tiny water droplets. Over time, a cloud can hold more and more tiny drops of water or pieces of ice. Wind and hot temperatures make the drops and pieces bump into each other. They then group together. They get bigger and heavier until they're too heavy to even stay in a cloud. They fall to the ground as something called precipitation. Precipitation can include rain, snow, hail, or sleet. Precipitation can form into different types. This is because of different air temperatures. If the air between the cloud and the ground is warm, the precipitation will fall as rain. If the rain freezes between the cloud and the ground, it becomes sleet. If the air in the cloud and below is very cold, the precipitation will fall as snow. Hail forms when ice crystals get blown upward inside of a cloud over and over. The ice will get bigger and bigger each time until it finally falls from the sky. Sleet is smaller than hail. Sleet falls in cold weather. Precipitation comes from storms. Thunderstorms are the most common type of storm. They're caused when warm, wet air hits cold, dry air. The warm, wet air rises fast to form huge clouds.
There are 118 species of weaver birds, and most live in sub-Saharan Africa. While some species live on the open savanna and eat mostly seeds, others live in forests and prefer feasting on insects. Researchers looked at studies done on different species of weaver birds to examine the relationships between their diets, habits, and social behavior. They found that seed-eating birds living in the open savanna tended to forage in groups, nest in large colonies, and have multiple mates per breeding season. The insect-eating, forest-dwelling birds, on the other hand, were more likely to forage and nest alone and have a single mate per season. These divergent social behaviors are likely influenced by their different diets and habitats. Working together makes it easier for birds that eat seeds out on the savanna to find spots with a large supply of seeds. There's also safety in numbers out on the open savanna, further incentivizing flocking. Their polygamous breeding may be a result of the smaller number of nesting sites in the savanna. By contrast, working together to find food wouldn't help forest-dwelling, insect-eating weaver birds as much, since insects tend to be more widely dispersed. There are a lot more suitable nesting sites in the forest, so these birds don't need to live in colonies, and monogamy makes sense for birds with more solitary lives. It seems that birds that eat bugs don't like to be bugged.